So what we have here are two charities. Both of them help prevent death in children. Both of them can prevent 5 deaths for every $1,000 of donation. However, there is a difference between charity A and charity B. Charity A spends $200 out of every $1,000 donation on advertising, whereas charity B spends $100 on advertising out of the donations that you make. So you can see the different kinds of allocations. So basically, you're giving a response of the percent that you will donate to B over A. So if you decide to donate 60% to B, it leaves 40% to A. So basically, you need to allocate money. So you can imagine that you have 10,000 US dollars, and then based on these 10,000 US dollars, what percentage would you allocate to A versus B? Okay, good. So we have 8 of you participating. That's good. All right, moving on to this one. Charities A and B both save lives with the same effectiveness. Charity A publishes the names of donors and how much they donated on their website. Charity B keeps donors anonymous. So I saw one team really played a little bit with this, whether people donate in a booth or they donate, make a decision publicly. So this gets a little bit of that, whether people prefer to be anonymous or they prefer to have their name shared. So you can decide which one you want to allocate more money to. All right. Another one, and this relates a little bit more to the COVID pandemic and relates to some of the research that we've done. Charity A focuses on providing well-tested vaccinations that has 95% effectiveness to prevent certain deaths of 95 out of 100 people. However, vaccination may cause, could be, 5 out of 100 of those vaccinated to die from side effects. Right? Charity B focuses on providing equally well-tested vaccination, but has only 90% effectiveness, which means that it prevents a certain death of 90 out of 100 people. It has no documented side effects. Right? So you can decide which one of these charities, which one of these vaccinations you prefer to donate to. Okay? Yeah. So what are we trying to test here? Trying to look at whether people care about advertising or don't care about advertising. So out of the 12 in the classroom, what we see is this. Seems like on average, all of you would like to allocate 72% to charity B over charity A. And if we look at charity B, it is the one with less advertising. Okay? Make sense? Why would you make this kind of decision? Why allocate more to B over A? What is the reason that you decided on average to spend more money on charity B compared to charity A? Yeah. So maybe a sense of control, maybe something about marketing that feels either misaligned with charities or it feels like it's out of our control and we don't understand the way that marketing companies work and think about this. So interesting here, and I would summarize this, and this is very much in line with our findings. So the first project that I did that I'll show you shows that people have an aversion to spending their money, allocating their money to charities that spend more on advertising. So they prefer charities that spend less on advertising. Over here, we actually had a hypothesis for this. Our hypothesis, mine and a student that took this course 3 years ago called Mannix, who is now, he's graduated, he's, I think, going for a PhD, he's doing a master's, and he's here in a lab at HKU. So we had the hypothesis that people really want their name associated with a charity. So for example, when you go around campus, what do you see? Li Kai-shing, the Jockey Club, you know, everyone who donates wants their plank. I'm sure here somewhere there's like a plank of a name of somebody who donated these wonderful chairs and projectors and everything. So we had this hypothesis. What's your hypothesis? Do you agree with this hypothesis? Do you have a different hypothesis? How many agree with our hypothesis? Seems right? About right? Some of you nod, so. However, what is it that we found was that people prefer anonymity. So let's see what happens in this classroom with 11 students. Seems like you don't have a preference, about 50-50. I don't think this really is very different from 50-50 split. So it seems like here we don't have a real preference. Both of them seem okay. So it seems like you don't show any preference or you don't care about this factor so much. So I'll tell you a little bit about these factors and about this Mentimeter. I'll get to it in a second. But before this, I just want to tell you how many charities there are to choose from. So when it comes to 2020, just in the US, you have 1.5 million charities. How many people in the US? 350 million people. So for every 350 persons in the US, you have a charity available. So very large number of charities. So let's say that you want to do some good in the world. How would you do this good? How to choose between 1.5 million charities? Very difficult, right? So what do people typically do? How to approach a problem where we're so overwhelmed with choice? Every charity comes to us in the street, in the marketing, social media, influencers, our families, our communities, our religious groups. They all want part of our donation. They all have something that they care about. And we want to help all possible causes, but we do have to choose. How do we choose? What do people typically do? All right. Search more. Yeah. 1.5 million. You'll find 1.5 million. What do you do once you find 1.5 million? It's really difficult to choose this kind of thing. Even ChatGPT and all the generative AI is going to create a problem because we can't sort through these things. And what we need to understand is that when we contribute to one charity, typically it means that we're taking away from another charity. So we do have an opportunity cost. So sometimes we think it doesn't really matter. Whatever charity I contribute to, if I, for example, I go down the street and somebody comes to me and they say, WWF, you have to conserve the environment, give to us. And you were going to give to the best charity, but then you decided to give to WWF or some other charity. The question is, does it matter? And I'm here to tell you that there is definitely an opportunity cost, because when we want to do the most good, if we contribute to one charity, it comes on the expense of contributing to a different charity, because we have limited funds, and we definitely have what's called bounded rationality and limited cognitive resources. We can't comprehend 1.5 million charities and all these causes and all these things in the world. So I'll summarize for you some of the insights, the psychological science insights based on a lot of surveys that we've been doing. We try to understand, how do people decide how to do good in the world? And then we realize that there's a real misconception, and people actually who really aim to do good actually at the end have suboptimal performance in their donations, in doing good. They mean to do well, but actually the way that they behave kind of backfires on them. So I'll just give you the basic statistics, and here you have it over here from the Hope Consulting in 2010. It's very consistent in many years, so reports that came after that are consistent with this number. I took these slides from Giving What We Can, which is one of the charities under the umbrella of effective altruism. And you can see that only a third, you said, for example, let's go and do some research. Let's just Google this. Let's just see what things we want to contribute to. Only a third of the people do this. Most of the people contribute to what is it that's available. Somebody came to them in the street. Somebody came to them on campus. Perhaps they saw an advertisement. Perhaps they saw something on media. And then they said, oh, I really care about this. So I'm going to donate. How many people actually go, press the link, Google things, research things? Very, very few. In addition, only 3% really care about performance and about effectiveness. Many people don't care about this kind of thing, but they care about things like control, for example. Or they care about things like, what is happening with my money? Do I know what marketing is doing with it? They have all kinds of gut reactions and gut intuitions telling them what it is that they should do. But only 3% of that is based on effectiveness and comparison. Now, most people, they have this feeling that if they contribute to one charity over the other, perhaps the difference between them is times 1.5, times 2 better. So if you take all the Red Cross, Save the Child, WWF, and all these other charities that come to us, maybe the difference is times 2, at best. However, I'm going to show you evidence today that when we compare these kinds of charities against each other, actually it could be up to 100%, 100 times more effective than others. So if you can use your $1 in order to create, let's say, 1 unit of good, just imagine that this $1 can do 100 units of good. So you have the lost opportunity cost of 99 units of doing good. Actually, this change between these two things, us believing that things are 1.5 to 2 times more effective, but actually in reality, 10 times to 100 times more effective, this is a real loss. So we can do a lot more with the same money that we invest if we just invest this properly. In order to do this, we need to understand how people think. How do people approach charity? How do people decide what is it that they contribute to? So a lot of surveys. This is one of the surveys from 2008. I don't know a lot of these surveys. But just say that this research only looks at the most affluent 30%. So just talking to the rich, the top 30%. Many of us in Hong Kong are part of this top 30% just by the fact that we live in Hong Kong. The top 30%, asking them, how do you donate money? What is it that? And just counting how much money is given. So you can see over here we have 230 billion. And most of them, you've got like foundation grant making and charitable requests and corporate giving and all this, but actually quite a lot of this, 229, comes from individual donations. So you've got very wealthy people out of the top 30% who are making all these charitable donations. And this doesn't have anything to do with the government and the taxes and the things that just operate because we pay these taxes. This comes because people want to donate to charity. Now, out of these individuals, how much is given by different social ranks? So for example, the wealthiest, all the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates and all these very, very wealthy people, they have a very high stake in this, so 115 billion comes from them. But actually, there's a very big proportion that doesn't come from all these very affluent people. It comes from people more like us, closer to the middle class, right? We've got like 57 here from the next 29, and then the final 70%. $57 billion is a lot of money that can be used properly to do a lot of good in the world. If it's not allocated, if we're not capitalizing on it, if we're not allocating this to the charities that are 100 times more effective, then we're really losing on maximizing all these benefits that individuals contribute, that are not all the Warren Buffett and the Bill Gates, but actually people like us from the middle class. In addition, when we want to understand how do people do their research, so only 35% do any research based on this survey in 2009. 65% don't even look at any kind of research. How much research do they do? Less than an hour. So you can see 14% less than 15 minutes, 15 to 60%, about 34%. So not a lot of research. And what does most research look like? Most research is click on the charity website and look at the charity website statistics or figures or photos, not even looking at third parties that evaluate charities. They just go to the charity and based on some gut intuition, based on the information provided by Save the Child, Red Cross, WWF, they decide, oh, okay, this advertising, marketing, brochures, they look good, therefore we'll donate. So even research that we do in charitable giving is very, very limited. So you can see over here, organization website, 16%, employees that work in the charities, 14%, a friend of a family member, 14%. Is that really research? Not so much. This is more like word of mouth. So it turns out that first, a lot of people don't do any research. And when we do research, it's not really research that is objective. It's not something that is really assessing what the charities are doing. It's more like word of mouth. I heard from the website, I heard from an employee, I heard from my community, my friends and my family, therefore I donate. So you can see that effectiveness is really not taken into account in any of these. Yeah. So in the past decade and a half, a group of social psychologists like myself decided that we're going to try and study these things and started a whole domain called the psychology of effective or ineffective altruism, where we try to understand the different challenges. And one of the main challenges is that it's a lot about emotional appeal. There's not a lot of effectiveness and evidence. And we want to try and understand why do people not look at effectiveness? Why is gut reactions and emotions so important when it comes to charitable giving? And if we tell people about the lost opportunity cost, the ability to donate a lot better, do they change the way that they do things or not? So personal preferences, gut reactions, emotions, kind of till now really win over the argument of doing more good and doing good better. And now we have increasing more evidence. There's lots of groups in many places around the world that are trying to study altruism and trying to study how people make decisions, just like our project too, trying to put this to the empirical test by asking people what is it that they donate. In addition, just like I showed you in the previous slide, there is a underestimation of just how big the differences are between charities. So most people don't understand the differences. So they need a little bit more information about the differences between charities and just how much they're losing for not choosing the right charity. So people really underestimate effectiveness. So even when provided with this information, they just can't believe there's such a big difference between charities chosen by, like, say, GiveWell to charities that are approaching them on campus or in the street. Okay? And finally, this is also one of the like seminal understandings that we have, is that people just don't know how. So let's say that they really care about this, they don't know how to do this. And there's nothing that really motivates them to do this, aside from them knowing that they've done a little bit better in terms of effectiveness. It doesn't really help them, because if they contribute to the one recommended by the church or the temple or the university or their parents, and they get this better social connection, they get this affiliation, stronger relationships with others. And that seems to be the main motivation rather than doing more good. It does seem like people are not motivated to do this and they don't know how to do it. And perhaps if we give them different tools, then they can do better, and we can change a little bit of how they behave. So I'm going to show you a video, and this is a video by Luke, who is going to talk a little bit about what it means to do calculations of cost effectiveness. And typically when we think about cost effectiveness and about performance, we think about the corporate world, because in the corporate world, we have a board, and the board represents the shareholders, the stakeholders. And over there, there's really an emphasis on how do we measure, how do we know that we're getting better, and the stock market represents the value that is given in the assessment by the public. But we don't have anything similar to that. Up until 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have anything about that. GiveWell and some of the effective altruism groups try to change some of that. Given what we can, and look over here, are some of the people who communicate effective altruism to others, just to try to help them to understand, why do we even need something like effective altruism? Why do we need to study these kinds of things? So he's a great communicator. He has a podcast, some YouTube videos. So I want you to very carefully listen to this video. It's going to be something like 4 or 5 minutes. And I want you to pay close attention and really think, for each one of these factors that he's talking about, how can we study this in people? How can we help them understand this? How can we see whether there's a way to optimize this or not? So how much of this is evidence-based? How much of what people are doing actually is based on evidence? And how much is gut reactions and things that we can study and improve over time, okay? So cost effectiveness, 4 or 5 minutes.
Cost effectiveness is the measure of how much it takes in resources to achieve a desired outcome. In theory, at least, you can calculate a charity's cost effectiveness by adding up everything the charity will achieve with its resources, its benefits, adding up all of the costs incurred by the charity to do this, its costs, and then dividing the benefits by the costs. In practice, however, calculating a charity's cost effectiveness is typically quite complicated. It's not always easy to measure or quantify the charity's benefits and costs, especially when you're looking at what the next dollar might get you, not just what things cost in the past. You've probably heard the statement, past performance is no guarantee of future results, spoken quickly at the end of ads for financial products. The same is true for charities. When estimating cost effectiveness, you need to combine the best evidence from the past with rational expectations of what the future might look like. Imagine that you're trying to determine which of 2 charities is more cost effective based on historical data. Both charities have similar programs. They both save lives by administering healthcare. You've added up all the lives that each charity has saved, all the costs incurred by each charity, and you've divided each charity's benefits, measured in lives saved, by its costs, measured in dollars. If you simply compare Charity A to Charity B without doing a cost effectiveness calculation, you would immediately notice that Charity A has saved more lives. However, when you calculate cost effectiveness, it becomes clear that Charity B is the more cost effective charity. Charity A saves 2 lives per $10,000, whereas Charity B saves 5 lives per $10,000. All else being equal, it is more cost effective to give money to Charity B. Though it has saved fewer lives overall than Charity A, it saves lives more cost effectively. 2 charities that work towards the same goal, such as saving lives, are relatively easy to compare. However, 2 charities that help people in different ways can be difficult to compare. Suppose you're trying to compare Charity C, which provides massages to millionaires, and Charity D, which distributes insecticide-treated bed nets to children in low-income countries. Simply comparing the number of outcomes that each charity achieves per dollar would be misleading in this case. Charity C achieves 0.1 outcomes per dollar, or put another way, it costs them $100 to achieve an outcome, whereas Charity D, on the other hand, only achieves 0.05 outcomes per dollar, or $200 to achieve 1 outcome. If Charity C and D were both producing the same outcome, Charity C would be the more cost-effective option. However, they're producing very different outcomes. It costs Charity C $100 to give a millionaire a massage for an hour, where it costs $200 for Charity D to prevent a case of malaria. If you had $200 to donate, would it be better spent at Charity C, giving 2 millionaires a massage, or Charity D, preventing 1 case of malaria? Of course, I think that preventing malaria would be a much better use of your donation. Comparing charities can be like comparing apples and oranges. It isn't always easy, and there aren't perfect ways of making decisions, but there are some useful approaches. One way of comparing charities with different outcomes is to create an equation to convert different outcome measures to a third common measure. For instance, the charity evaluator GiveWell evaluates charities that create several kinds of outcomes, such as lives saved, increased consumption, and years of healthy life. To compare the cost effectiveness of different kinds of charities, GiveWell compares each charity's cost effectiveness to a single measure.
Yeah, so this is a very important demonstration of some of the things that GiveWell does. We talked a little bit about giving cash directly. So Give Directly is the benchmark for effective altruism, and it has a benchmark of 1. It's considered to be highly effective, but other charities, you can see, are several times more effective than Give Directly. So Give Directly, we've done a lot of randomized control trials, and Nobel Prize winners conducted it in various places in the world. And it seems like when we work with developing countries in the global south, then we can really leverage the money that we have in order to do a lot more good. So, for example, they won the world 29 times more than Give Directly. Against Malaria Foundation, 13.6 times more than Give Directly. So it seems like they're doing this cost calculation in order to try and compare them to come to some conclusions to give people some estimate of just how much more good are you doing compared to just giving cash directly to people and letting them do what it is that they want with this cash.
The cost effectiveness of simply giving cash to people in need. GiveWell uses some complex formulas and value judgments to convert outcomes like lives saved into an equivalent amount of cash given. These calculations aren't perfect, but they can be very helpful in comparing different interventions and charities. In this example from GiveWell, donating to deworm the world is estimated to be about 29 times more effective than giving cash to people in need.
What I want to say about this is what's nice about GiveWell is that it really is very transparent about the way that they do these calculations. So all of you can go to their website and open up their weights in a Google sheet in order to see how they transform the money that is spent to compare this into number of years life saved. Every year they try and improve on these. So let's say 10 years ago, it was very, very basic and didn't have a lot of factors in it. But every year they really tried and improve on it. 3 years ago, they started doing some competition and GiveWell doing a competition where they invite others to attack their methodology. So the first time that we ran this class, actually the students, one of the tasks that they had was to study how GiveWell does its methodology and then submit some recommendation in how to improve this based on what we learned in psychological science. And what's nice about this is that they give cash to people who help them improve. So just by participating, they gave out $500 US. The first winners were 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 US for the ones that gave the best feedback. And after they received all of the feedback, they responded to all of that feedback and then made some improvements on their formulas. So there's a lot of calculations. Not all of this is endorsed by everybody, but it's a good base for discussion where with transparency and with attacks by the community in order to help them improve, they're really pushing the bar on how to compare different charities from different domains.
When you compare charities that you're interested in supporting, you may need to think further about how different outcomes compare to each other. For instance, if you're interested in comparing animal charities to human-focused charities, you might need to think about how the value of a farmed animal's life compares to the value of a human life. If you're interested in comparing a charity focused on the future to a charity working to help people today, you might need to think about how to value your great-great-granddaughter's life compared to the value of a life today. There are no clear answers to these questions, but some lines of reasoning are going to be much better than others. You shouldn't just look for charities that have been cost-effective in the past. You should look for charities that will be cost-effective in the future, particularly with the use of your donation. To determine whether a charity will be as cost-effective in the future as it has been in the past, you should consider how much need the charity has for more funding. If the charity has recently pioneered a new and highly cost-effective program, but the program has not received significant attention or funds, then it could be an ideal giving opportunity. If, on the other hand, a cost-effective charity is already well-known and well-funded, your donation may not make that much of a difference, particularly if the charity already has a large budget and your donation is relatively small. Charity evaluators like GiveWell and Animal Charity Evaluators refer to a charity's funding needs as room for more funding. To determine how a charity will be affected by your potential donation, you should consider, has a charity recently received many large donations or grants? Does the charity have plans for growth or expansion? Is the charity mostly limited by lack of funding, or are there other barriers to a charity's work, such as the lack of skilled employees? Will your donation support the charity's most effective programs, or will they go to one of the less effective ones? Are you donating a large enough amount that it will allow the charity to create a completely new program? And could the charity's programs have diminishing returns? For instance, has the charity been working to cure a disease that is already nearly eradicated? The three
What's nice about all these factors is that these are factors that typically people don't really consider and don't really think about. Definitely, they don't know how to do these kinds of comparisons and how to think about, for example, neglectedness. It could be that something that they really care about, so we care about saving the children, but it could be that already billions of money is going that way. But there's something that is as important, but is completely neglected and nobody is contributing to this, then you putting your money in there can make a real difference over there. Okay? So this is just a teaser. He has a lot more videos on this, but this is just to give you some ideas on what GiveWell and effective altruism are trying to do. So what we try to do in academia is support these organizations. So many of them have think tanks and they have academics working for them. At the last session of this course, where we're going to talk about careers, I'm going to try and show you that there's lots of careers available to you after you graduate in order to work in some of these organizations, in order to try and quantify. Use the skills that you've learned in this class in order to help these charities have some academic insights in order to try and help them to do more good and use the right kind of weights. Okay? So I'll show you a little bit of how we aim to do this. So Mannix, so in the syllabus I referred to Mannix and the work that I've done with Mannix, but back in the first class that I taught about effective altruism, so 3 years ago where Mannix sat down, I presented effective altruism and we were trying to decide, is this a good paradigm, not a good paradigm? What does this mean? Do we care about this? Do we want to know more about the psychology of altruism? And Mannix was really into this. So he came to me at the end of the course and he said, I'm really interested in this and I need to do a thesis. So how about I do a thesis together with you in order to study the psychology of altruism? And I was really interested in this. There's a very certain way that I do a thesis with students. I only do replications and extensions because I think this is the best structure for an undergraduate thesis, and it helps validate the past to see what is credible in the past, but also to offer extensions in order to bring some new insights for the future. So I sat down together with Manik, and we went over to try and identify what is right now, 3 years ago, the best evidence that we have in psychology to help us understand how people make charitable giving. And we came out with one book chapter. This is the best evidence that we have, a book chapter from 2011, where they did some data collection, a little bit like we're going to do for project 2 in this class. And I told Manik, so read what they've done over there, try to adopt their methodology, and conduct a replication. First, do exactly the same things that they've done in this book chapter. And then I want you to think about 2 or 3 other extensions, new factors that were not there before that you want to study and you want to understand in order for us to get some insight. So you can see the factors over here on the left. The first 4, perceived waste, past cost, in-group, out-group, diversification, these are factors that existed in the book chapter. So these are replications. We conducted them exactly as they were in the book chapter. But Manik's added 2 more factors, and these were anonymity, the one that we just went over at the beginning with the Mentimeter, and paid for overhead. So I'm going to show you some of the results from that. The thing I want to say about what Manik did with me, he was one of the very first students that decided to do a registered report with me. And what this means, and you can see over here, the recommendation, stage 2, we briefly talked about this 3 or 4 sessions ago when we talked about the challenges in science. But one of the problems is that we have a lot of biases. We have outcome bias, hindsight bias, we have confirmation bias, and we also have publication bias. So, for example, one of the problems is, let's say, for example, you're a vaccination company, and you've conducted 100 trials for a vaccination. However, only 2 out of the 100 worked as expected. So you, as the company, the pharmaceutical company, you submit this to the journals, and the journals, what do? They make some evaluation on this, and then they say, these 98 that showed no results are not interesting for us because you didn't find anything, so we're going to reject this, and we're just going to accept the 2 that seem to have worked. And what ends up happening at the end is that you have only 2 published findings about the vaccination working, where the 98 that have not worked have been rejected and are sitting in somebody's file drawer. So this is a publication bias. At the end, what happened is that we learn from this. So we don't even submit null findings, especially not if I'm a pharmaceutical company and I want to get some money back from this. So what ends up happening is that we don't even submit the 100 to the journals. We just submit the 2 that worked, and then we hide the 98 in our file drawer, and nobody knows about that. Registered reports, which is what Manik did over here, tries to overcome this. How do you overcome this? So Manik and all of my undergraduate students doing a thesis with me create a plan, and this is a very detailed plan. We have everything, including data, but this is simulated data. So we go to Qualtrics, and they say, please simulate participants. And based on this, we have everything. We have the introduction, we have the methods, and we have the results based on simulated data. Many of you have done this in your project 2, stage 1. This is what is aimed to have a good pre-registration plan. This is what I'm going to do before I go and proceed to do a data collection. So I'm going to go on a public website. I'm going to upload our collective plan. I'm going to say, this is our plan. This is what we aim to do. This is what is called a pre-registration. So we commit publicly to putting our plans somewhere where everybody can check what is it that we hypothesize. So everybody knows what is it that we aim to achieve. However, registered report takes this one step further. Instead of us doing this by ourselves, we take this plan and we submit this to a journal. And the journal goes over the plan with expert peer reviewers who give us some feedback and say, you've done this well, you've not done this well. And then they give us a chance to revise. The nice thing about this is that there is no outcome because we haven't collected the data yet. So if reviewers look at our plan, they don't even know if this is going to work or not work. At the end of the stage 1 of a registered report, what usually happens is that we all come to an agreement. Us, the authors, the reviewers, and finally the editor and the journal, we come to an agreement that this is the best plan possible, and then they give us what is called an in-principle acceptance. In-principle acceptance for a registered report is a guaranteed publication. It doesn't matter if this is lower than 0.05 p-value or higher than 0.05 p-value. It doesn't matter. No findings, not no positive or negative. Nobody cares about the outcome. The only thing that we care about is the process, and this is the process that all of us agreed on. So Manik did 2 stages. In stage 1, he submitted his pre-registration plan to a journal. The journal peer-reviewed everything, gave us an in-principle acceptance. Then we collected the data. Then we wrote up the results. Then he submitted it to stage 2, and then we received the recommendation. So over here you can see, so this was understanding biases in heuristics. So we've got Romain Espinoza, based on reviews by Amanda Geiser and Jonathan Berman. So it just goes to show that undergraduate in their fourth year doing an undergraduate thesis, within 6 to 8 months, were able to submit this to a journal, go through the entire process of expert peer review in order to ensure that there's no publication bias, no confirmation bias, outcome bias, content bias. So all of this processed within 8 months, and finally received an endorsement. And now it's going so after it's received endorsement, this recommendation, it's published officially by a journal. And in this case, it's published by Royal Society Open Science, which is a well-known, reputable journal in our field. So this just goes to show that this is not a typical undergraduate thesis. This is a thesis that has met the higher standards of open science. And what's nice about this is that we all agreed on this together. So us, Romain, Amanda, and Jonathan, we all came to an agreement that this is the best plan possible, not just for the replication, but also for the extension. Okay? What's good about this is that if we're able to find support for these 4 factors from the book chapter, this means that this is very highly credible evidence because it was done once in one sample in 2011 and published in a book chapter. But then without outcome bias, content bias, publication bias, confirmation bias, we were able to confirm this again with another sample about 10 to 12 years later. Right? So this already shows very high consistency between these two independent group of scholars were able to achieve the same kind of thing. So this is already very nice. Any questions about what is a registered report and what is a pre-registration and what Manik did over here? That clear? So we aim, when we look at evidence, to see whether there are good replications and whether they achieve high standards of open science, just like doing this as a registered report with 2 stages, and an in-principle acceptance over stage 1 pre-registration plan before collecting the data. Okay. All right, so what did Manik do? We can go and listen to him talk about this. So he gave a brown bag at HBU after he completed the thesis. He also gave you a tutorial. I hope many of you watched this before you embarked on your stage 1 for project 2. So this is his. This is the one that I gave during reading week. So I went to Hanoi and they asked me about what is it that I'm doing with students and what is it that I can do in order to inform charities. I even met with some of the charities in Vietnam and Hanoi in order to try and understand what are the difficulties and how they think about charity and how people donate to them, how people find them. So you can go and listen to me give this talk, but it's very similar to some of the content that I'm talking about today in this class. So going back to this question of advertising. So this is typically how we asked it. So it's the same 2 charities that you saw in the first slide in the Mentimeter. How would you allocate 10,000 between these 2 charities? And this is what the call sheets look like. Participants, this is what they see. When they see these different options, you can allocate 100% to A on the far left, and then it increases in intervals of 10%. The midpoint allocate equally means that we have no preference, so actually we couldn't care less about advertising. Both A and B, because they're the same effectiveness, then we donate to both of them. All the way, keep going, intervals of 10 up to allocate all to this. You had something like 70+% allocating to B. What is it that we found? Something very, very similar. So you can see very, very similar here that we have the mean of between 70 and 80, somewhere 75%. Very close to what we found here in the Saskatchewan with a much smaller sample. We can also see the distribution. So some people say, I don't really care. They're somewhere in the middle. But then we have a lot more people that are saying, we have 100%. I want to allocate everything to charity B because I really don't like advertising. So if you can minimize advertising, that is a good thing for me. And then we run a statistical test. When we do this kind of scenario, the typical statistical test is a 1-sample t-test. What does a 1-sample t-test do? A 1-sample t-test compares this to one of the points here. The point that we want to compare with this scenario is to 50-50, because 50-50 says we have no preference. So if what we find, so this mean over here, 75%, deviates from 50-50, significantly deviates with a p-value that's lower than 0.05, then we reject the null hypothesis that people don't have any preference. And in this case, you can see on the top, it's a little bit small, so I'm going to just tell you. The p-value is very, very small. It's 0.000001. It's just the scientific notation of writing a p-value. The Hedges G, which is very close to a Cohen's D, is an effect size of 0.8 something. Just so you understand, we talked a little bit about benchmarks. We have a whole guide about what effect sizes are. But I'll just tell you that a Cohen's D or a Hedges G of 0.8 is considered in social psychology to be a very large effect. So when you find something like this, it shows a real deviation, a real bias in the way that people think about advertising when it comes to charitable giving. Okay? So this is a real confirmation of what the book chapter found. And our effects were comparable, sometimes even larger than the effects that they documented in the book chapter in 2011. Okay? So finally, the conclusion is people really prefer charity B. Now, the next question that we need to ask ourselves is this effective or not effective? So I asked you a little bit about why is it? And you said, control, or there's something about effectiveness. So if they invest so much in marketing, maybe they're not as effective. So even though we have the information, so up on the top it says they have the same effectiveness, 5 deaths per 1,000 US dollars. So at the end, both of them do exactly the same amount of work. So why is it that we care about marketing? What is it that we can do in order to change people's perspective about marketing if this is something that shouldn't be a factor? So I'm going to ask you to try and reframe this kind of thing in order to try and understand how we think about it. So imagine, for example, that they've invested all of the possible marketing in year 1 and year 2. They don't need any more advertising or marketing. What happens then? We look at what's left over. And what's left over is that you can see that charity A actually requires a lot less than charity B in order to do the same amount of good. There's no need for charity. Both of them are as famous. Then actually charity A is the more effective one because it's able to save 5 lives with 800 instead of 900 US dollars. So sometimes if we just reframe things, if we just give people additional information in order to take away the factor of advertising, then they can come to a different conclusion. So when we ask people this, we give them charity A to charity B, most of them are like, of course I want to donate to charity A, not charity B. It's exactly the opposite from what they said in the previous question. Okay? Does this make sense? Do you have any questions about this? So first insight here, even though the effectiveness is exactly the same, 1,000 US dollars spent at the end to save 5 lives, people have something that they don't want in their own donations in contributions to advertising. But sometimes just a very simple reframing, giving them additional insight of what is it that they've decided to do, actually gives them the motivation or changes their perspective in order for them to make a completely opposite decision to what is it that they decided before. Okay? So just a reframing can really shift things. So here we have, instead of the beginning we had over here, we had advertising. So this is advertising. And now we move on to overhead. What is overhead? Overhead is how much we invest in managers, in admin, in bureaucracy in order to make sure that everything works. So you can change in your mind marketing from the previous question to overhead here. Do we care how much charity invests in overhead? So we asked the same kind of question with Mannix to replicate what it is that they've done in the book chapter. And it really seems that here as well, there is some bias against overhead. So people don't want their money to go to advertising and they don't want their money to go to overhead. Right? Here, we want to compare how much they care about overhead, how much they care about marketing. So we can look at the effect size. The effect size is about half of the one before. So they care about this, but they don't care about this to the same extent. Right? Could be all kinds of different factors. So you can see here the factors, the scale is a little bit different. There's 1 to 5. It's not exactly on the same scale, but generally the effect size, because it's standardized, we can see that the effect size is 0.41 compared to the 0.8 something that we saw in the previous one. So that's how we can rank the different factors. People really have an aversion to marketing. Overhead, they have an aversion, but not as strong. In social psychology, 0.4 is considered to be a medium effect, about average effect. So if you aggregate all of the effects in social psychology, the average one is about 0.4. So this is something that we need to pay attention to. We need to care about it, but it's not as large as the one with the marketing. Okay? Now, suppose that we know this. Suppose that we've learned this. The book chapter wrote something about what is it that we can do about it. So Mannix was preoccupied with it, and he wanted to say, okay, so I have this insight from the book chapter, but I want to add an extension that would allow me to gain some insight of a way out. So let's say that I run a charity, and now I understand. Mannix came to me with a good reputation, with a registered report, and they told me that people have an aversion to overhead in marketing. What can I do? Is there a way out? So there is a way out, and this is the extension that Mannix did. So what happens when, instead of telling people that some of their money is going to overhead, you just get some external donor, so let's say Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, are agreeing to participate as boosters. So they're saying, I'll take care of all the overhead and all the marketing. Because people don't want to donate to marketing and to overhead, I'll take care of this. Me, Bill Gates, me, Warren Buffett. And then people have the feeling that their money goes all the way to doing the good in the world and not invested in overhead and marketing. What then? They gave these 2 different charities. Charity A for 100 donations, 50 goes to helping children, 50 goes to administrative costs. So 50-50 overhead, but the money that you give, only 50% goes to helping children. But in Charity B, for $100 donation, 100 goes to helping children. So everything that you donate goes to the doing the good. But another donor covers the corresponding $100. Right? So what happens then? and this helped us to get people to donate more. So this is what he found. You can see over here, some people say, I couldn't care less about it. So you've got a lot of people in the middle. But you can see that actually there's lots of people who say, yeah, I definitely want to donate to the charity where you have the corresponding external funder that will take care of all these costs for me. Okay? It's a very, very simple trick. You just get an external donor. We'll call this a booster. You explain the problem with efficiency. You explain that people have gut intuitions and that they don't like to advertise and they don't like overhead with their own money. So they take care of everything, and then people are boosted. People are willing to donate more money. People will prefer your charity over somebody else's charity. Okay? So this is a very, very simple trick. The trick is you find external donors to take care of the admin or the advertising. Okay? So for example, when I sat down together with the people in Vietnam and trying to understand some of their things, so this is a very simple trick that they were very much into. And they thought that this is a good way for them to find their own boosters in order to help people who want to give their money not feel bad about their overhead and advertising, because all of them need overhead. All of them need to do some advertising in order to get some charity. Okay? Just a very simple way of doing boosters. I'll come back to the point of boosters. How do you get people to act as boosters? Do you need Bill Gates, or can you do this with Warren Buffett? We can also do some tricks over them. So I'll show you an example that works with social psychologists that took insight and built a website in order to get people to become boosters. Okay? So there is a way out, and this is from a nice extension that Mannix did in a thesis at HKU based on a replication. Okay? Now, Mannix is not the first person who came up with it. He is just able to show this very clearly in an experimental paradigm, very similar to what you're doing in Project 2. But actually, some people took this and did this on a much larger scale. So here you have Uri Genizi. In this case, in the science paper, he actually did this with his wife and another co-author. So both of them worked together, or the three of them worked together. And he published this, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, published a book called Mixed Signals, and this is where he documents it. So this screen capture is from that book, where he talks about the insight that he gained from doing that science paper and from the field experiment that they conducted. And what you can see here, and this is a very interesting field experiment, you've got a control condition where they did no boosting or reframing or anything like that. You have seed, you have matching. So if you match people, so you say, okay, if you donate 50, I will donate 50. Or if you donate 50, then Warren Buffett will donate 50. So it seems like matching seems to boost to some extent. So moving from something like $8,000, it goes up to about $13,000. But what was the biggest boost? The biggest boost by far, going from something like $8,000 to something like almost $25,000, is overhead free. So it just is amazing how much aversion people have to putting their money into overhead. So just getting somebody to cover overhead can boost up to 2.5 times what is it that people are receiving. It's just amazing, this kind of aversion. And sometimes with very little insight, understanding that you can get boosters like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates to cover everything for you, can get you 2.5 times more donations to your charity. So you can see the science paper over here, avoiding overhead aversion in charity. So this is one example for how simple insights like the ones that we're going to gain in this classroom from this course can leverage some insight. Perhaps somebody is going to run this in the field, hopefully, maybe in Vietnam, Hanoi, somebody here in Hong Kong will try some of these insights in order to try to see how much boost do you get from these things. So this is, for example, the science paper. What's nice about this is that it's not enough to get the science paper. If this would be just a science paper by itself, I would be very, very hesitant. If you remember last class, I showed you a science paper, and that science paper had problems, had big issues. One issue is that it already had a note, and the note said there was a bug, and actually what we said in one of the studies just doesn't work anymore. The p-value doesn't show any rejection of the null. That is one problem. The second problem that we discussed at the end of the last session was that actually the same authors conducted a registered report replication, a little bit like what Mannix did. And what they found was that very mixed findings. In 3 different studies, they only found support in 1, and in the second and the third, in very large samples, they were not able to find good support for the science paper. So my conclusions on that, on promoting happiness by giving money to others, so pro-sociality is associated with happiness, I am very skeptical of that. And what I usually say, evidence is mixed, need more evidence. How about this one? Actually, if you recall, a few sessions back, I think it was our 3rd session, I told you about the challenges in science and how many labs from around the world are trying to replicate different findings in different fields. In social psychology, the replication rate is about 30 to 50%. So several people in economics decided to do this on a mass scale. So many labs from around the world said, we want to see that this works. We want to understand whether this really works or not. So not only did Mannix find support for this, If you cover overhead, then you can get a real boost from it. Actually, they were able to find a successful replication. Many places around the world and showing a very similar effect size. So this is what I consider to be more credible evidence. So when I have independent replications with many labs around the world, one of them I know because I personally did as a register report, then I can see, and this is credible stuff. And what's nice about this is that simple lab experiments like the ones we're going to run in Project 2 have the potential of transforming, informing people in the field in order to get boosts that are completely ridiculous, like 2.5. 2.5 for basically no investment whatsoever. Just making sure that you have different donors taking care of it. So it doesn't cost you really anything. It's just about getting some people to be boosted and some people to donate from the public. So what seems like a very simple paradigm, we have two charities, Charity A and Charity B. They're exactly the same in everything, aside from one simple factor. Actually, that simple factor, once we have an insight and we can see a bias towards one side, so it's away from the 50-50 split, then when we have this insight, we can move to a field study in order to see whether this has real implications or not. If you want, you're welcome to open the Google Doc. So we have a shared Google Doc that we're going to work on together. This is the Google Doc. And then see some of the items, both from your team and another team. And the basic idea is each team has another team to review. So you'll see the different items. I took 5 items from each team. And then what I'm asking you is to try and change that. Can you improve, not improve? If it's a perfect item, then just leave it alone. So you have the ability to either improve the item or add items by yourself, okay? But what I'm asking you to do is to see what other teams have done, improve this, or add new items based on that. So as you're sitting there talking, thinking, resting, you can also open this in order to see how you want to work on this. Yeah, so I'll just very briefly show you what this looks like. So each team has their own section. So for example, Team Vienna, reviewing Team Bangkok. So Team Bangkok, for example, has all their items here. So I just put this under like a table. So you'll see the intro and then the contrast between Charity A, Charity B. So these are the items that I'm going to run. So see if you have any feedback to help. So if you're Vienna and you're reviewing Bangkok, you can go here as Vienna and say, okay, something here doesn't make sense, or maybe something here about the framing, we can make it even better. Or if this is a perfect item and you really like it, just leave it alone. And then you have another box here afterwards to add new items based on this idea. And because this is kind of like a collaboration between Team Vienna and Team Bangkok, I'm going to run this, and both Team Vienna and Bangkok can use this item afterwards if they want it, okay? So this is just to help you learn from what other people are doing, to give them some feedback to use this or not use this. But good items that you'll add now, if I get this, and I will go over this after class, if this is a good item, then I will add this to our data collection, okay? 10-minute exercise. So I'll ask you to put things down a bit. I had a quick look at what you've done. So it's nice that you're thinking about things. I hope you can start to get a sense of the power of peer review, both to give and to receive is a little bit awkward. Like you want to be very polite and respectful, but you also want to give the insights and help others improve. Also receiving this kind of feedback always feels like you want to defend your own stuff, but you see that they have a point and you need to find some middle ground with it. So I feel like peer review is very, very powerful, and I use this in all sorts of different ways, and this is why it's important for me that the undergraduates doing a thesis with me actually go through extra peer review in their process. So we'll have another round of this, but I'll ask you to take a break for a second for me to show you that these insights can lead to something very, very impactful. So I want to show you giving multiplier, actually done by social psychologists, the group that I know. So at the beginning, I showed you 3 papers about the psychology of effective, ineffective altruism. So actually, Lucius is a PhD, turned a postdoc, and hopefully he'll get a position soon, but decided, based on the insights of what he learned in the classroom, in his experiments, to transform this into a website. And he built a website, and it's called Giving Multiplier. I want to introduce Giving Multiplier to you to just show you how a very, very simple idea can leverage something that you find here in the classroom into something that makes an impact by the million. So here's Giving Multiplier.
You want to do something good, perhaps a donation to a charity? But which one? You want to give in a way that's personally meaningful, a charity that speaks to your heart. But giving isn't just about your feelings. You also want your money to do as much good as possible. Charity experts do research to find the most effective charities. Most people don't know this, but the world's most effective charities are hundreds of times more effective than typical charities. They save many more lives and improve people's lives much more. For example, this charity can cure a child in Kenya infected with parasitic worms for just 66 cents. This reduces children's suffering and allows them to go to school again. That's incredibly effective. But perhaps you don't feel a personal connection to this charity. What should you do? Giving Multiplier offers a simple solution. Divide your donation between a charity you love and a super effective charity recommended by experts. Even better, Giving Multiplier will multiply your impact by adding to both donations. Try it out. Make a donation at givingmultiplier.org.
We're going to do this together. And last year, when I donated in the name of the class, actually I used Giving Multiplier in order to boost the donations by the class. I'm going to show you what this looks like. I'll just tell you the basic idea. It turns out that when people want to give a donation in order to make them feel better, this warm glow inside actually does not depend on the amount of money that they have. So for example, if you have $100 and you want to donate and feel the warm glow inside, sometimes it's enough for you to only spend 10 out of the $100 in that. And the difference in the amount of warm glow that you have when you spend 10 or when you spend 100 might not be that different. For each person, it's a little bit different. Some people need $50, not change from 100, but 10 is too much. So warm glow can be a percentage of how much money you actually have, but you don't need all of your money to go into the charity that gives you the warm glow. So if you tell people about effectiveness, maybe it's enough for them to take off the 100%, to give only 10% or 50%, and the rest they'll give to effective charities. So I'll show you the interface. The interface is very, very simple. It took them very small money to set this up. This is what it looks like. So you put here the donation. So for example, I really care about saving the children. So Save the Children is one of the charities that gives me the warm glow. Whenever I donate to Save the Children, I get a good feeling from this. And then another super effective charity. So we talked many times about Against Malaria Foundation. So if I just click this, I get a lot of information. First, a very brief insight about them. And then if I want, I can go and see their effectiveness information. So there's more and more on this. So I just choose first the thing that makes me feel good, then another one, super effective charity. Of all the effective charities, so I have a choice here, but out of this choice, all of these charities actually do a lot of good in the world. And then how much do I have to donate? Let's say I have $100 to donate. I was going to donate all of this to Save the Children, but now I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can do a little bit of a change. What do they offer me? How do you want to divide your donation? So by default, it has like a 50-50. And what's nice about this 50-50 is that it has a matching rate of 45%. So the more money in percent that you give to the effective charity over the thing that gives you a warm glow, the more that they match you. So for example, if you give 90%, the matching rate is only 9%. But if you increase this 20% effective, 30% effective, all the way to 90% effective, then the matching rate increases. And then suddenly your $100 is boosted because they add $81. And then the end donation amount that you have is $181. So this gets people to think, oh, okay, I have $100, but I want to be boosted. I have two types of warm glow inside. One, I really want to donate to Save the Children, but I also want to be boosted because I want to do more good with my money. So now I can balance these. So depending on who you are and what you want to do, you can decide which is the right one for you. Is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? Whatever that is. So it takes the idea of some people just need a little bit of the donation in order to feel the warm glow for the charity that they care about. They care about effectiveness not as much, but if you give them an incentive by offering matching, then it's really boosted. A very, very simple idea, but by now, they, through this, have shifted millions from people in order to get them to donate to more effective charities instead of just to the charity that they cared about to begin with. Where does the money come from, the booster? So it turns out that if you ask people if they want to be boosted, about a third, you don't need Warren Buffett, you don't need Bill Gates, about a third of the people say, oh, if I can get people to be more effective, definitely I want to be a booster, sign me up. It turns out about a third, and this is how they balance this whole thing. With a third of the people working as boosters, they're able to compensate and do all this matching effectively. So this works by itself. Social psychologists, based on the insights that they got in the classroom, effective charities were able to set this up. Now millions are handled through this, shifting people's preferences from what is it that they would normally donate to a lot more effective charities like the Against Malaria Foundation. Okay. What's also nice about this is, of course, because they're psychologists, they also did a randomized controlled trial on this, and they ran this. So they have all of the research around this, and then they also have a paper that came out of this in Science Advances. They can really test this up, and their main insights are bundling personal plus effective already boosts by 76%. 76%. That's amazing. Add matching to this, on top of this, another 55%. For any charity, these are huge numbers. The success of giving multipliers based on psychological science evidence is amazing. So a lot of the things that you can play with might give us additional insights into it. So you can go and you can read this, the randomized control trial. They've tried different things, a little bit like the crowdsourcing that we're doing for the hypothesis with the different teams. They tried different things, and this is the thing that worked the best. The last thing I just want to say, we tested a bunch of other things. For example, Manix did anonymity. At the beginning, we thought we had a hypothesis that people really want their names on buildings and they want their names associated with a donation. But actually what we found is that most people really preferred to go and donate without being associated with this. And then you can ask questions, is this effective, not effective? Effective altruism actually wants you to be public, because if you're public, then other people know about the charity, think about the charity, and maybe inspired to donate to that charity. So you can think about whether this is effective or not effective. But a lot of the insights that we gain from simple experiments like this can really help inform what we can do later. First, get some insight from field experiments, but then also set up charities. I think 2 years ago, the second task, the project 2, for some of the people were after we ran the data collection, was to design a charity and think how to implement this in real life in Hong Kong. All right. So we have 10 more minutes. So I'm going to let you continue and work on this. I'm still here. Nobody asked me anything, but I'm a resource available to you. So if you want to ask me about additional items, if you want to ask me something about the feedback that you received from Gilad, if there's something that you saw in the other team that you want to implement, if there's something that you saw from giving multiplier that you want to test in our data collection, you now have a place in the template for us to add additional items. So I saw some of them already. Yeah, so you have the place here for additional items. I think some of you already added some, so this is great. So if you add items now in the next 10 minutes before the end of the class, so I'll look at this about an hour after class. If you have some good items there, based on the stuff that we discussed today, based on stuff that you saw the other team do, based on some feedback that you got from Gilad, if this is a good item, I will include this in the data collection. And then if you want, you can include this in your stage too. Okay? You have 10 more minutes. I'm here for you. When you feel like you've had enough, in 10 minutes, you can just leave. It's up to you. Okay? So please go ahead.